welcome back to the channel. We're down at the little greenhouse here. Coming out to check on this. We've got all of our little sprouts coming up. Since the last update we've had some good temperatures and decent break-in temperatures. Our little water pump just kicked on here. As we walked in the door, it has been off for the last 45 minutes as it's just building energy and storing energy from the sun we got right now. I put our little actuator back on our window. It's still the end of February, but we've got warm enough temperatures. We hit 40 degrees outside today, and this little wax-filled tube is going to just basically press this cylinder up and open our little homemade window and vent all of the heat out. I got my thermometer in here somewhere. We got it down here. Sitting about 80 degrees inside our greenhouse here, which is really decent, especially for this shady side of our greenhouse over there. That northern corner is the most shady side during the winter time. So I've got a little bit going on in here. I've got some cuttings. I've got a lot of sprouts coming up, lots and lots of sprouts. And since the last 2 weeks, I've had these out here hardening off. I started these indoors, and these ones were actually started out here, so I don't have to worry about hardening those off. And our little red vein sorrel were started out here also, and they were all basically put right up on the heat that comes off of our compost. This little hose right here coming out of the floor comes right through our compost pile. I want to run outside and show the size of our compost pile. It's a little muddy out there right now. So this is about the size of compost pile I'm working with here. We've got about 3 cubic yards piled up on the back of this. So that compost pile is about 3 cubic yards. We've got a ton of material out back there. And all of the heat we're pulling from our compost, our warm wall here, is coming through there and getting banked right on this southern side. So we're getting heat from the sun warming this board up during the day, and then we've got our hose buried about 4 inches deep underneath there, and it comes back up and drains into our overflow tank. So we've got all of that energy that we're trapping inside our plants, and we're taking this little extra poly and we're throwing it over top of these plants at nighttime just to protect them from any freezing temperatures, because we had 22 degrees overnight last night. But looking forward, the temperatures are high 20s during the night and close to 30s and 40s during the day. So we're looking good for the end of February, beginning of March here. So I'm getting a jump start on everything with our compost heated floor. Basically, we're trapping all of that energy in this floor and into these bricks with the sun, basically like our little heat sink bricks here. We've got lots of seeds sprouting because these warm up so much during the day. They're physically warm to me. This is some of our chamomile, some of our lemon balm. I will break that apart and I will make several potted plants out of each little section of these. I am trying to propagate out what I can right now that will survive these cold temperatures at nighttime. So we've got all the insulation and all this free material basically that we're just using to create the best system we can to passively heat this with our compost pile also. So I really wanted to come out here and show everything we got going on and all the stuff we've got sprouting, and we're just slowly working in this little greenhouse. We don't have a whole lot of room, but this little small greenhouse is super easy to heat, and it's super easy to hold that heat in here because we insulated it a little bit with our bubble wrap, and our floor is passively holding all that heat at nighttime. So those bricks will just store energy like a battery overnight. Plus, paired with the compost heat traveling through underneath those bricks overnight, it definitely holds a lot more heat and retains at least 50 to 60 degrees overnight. So to me, that's a heated floor when we have frozen ground outside. So I've been getting in gear, trying to get ready for spring, and in our large greenhouse I've been making some changes and getting a nice Jean Pain composting system like this one in place. So I want to go check that out next. So here we are out at the 52-foot greenhouse, much larger than our little 6x12 here. We've got our PEC tubing laid out. Let's check the temps in here. Sitting about 72, 74 degrees maybe. We ended up catching a couple mice over the last couple weeks here, so it's definitely productive. As a mouse will find their way to our greenhouse, they will basically just get caught and we'll release them somewhere else. We've got this PEC tubing coming up from all the way down at the other end of our greenhouse. We had about 100 feet of this PEC tubing, and I got this nice large container. I want to use this for my guppies and my aquaponics this summer here. But I wanted to show all this PEC tubing coming all the way down, and how I laid that out And it's basically a giant version of our small greenhouse, except our small greenhouse, the PEX tubing runs up underneath the floor. I want our tubing, as it gets warmed, to basically be either in the middle or on the outside of our beds here, in order to really be productive and insulate our inner soil from the outer soil, all of the cold temperatures outside the greenhouse. Just running through all of the little updates in this greenhouse, I wanted to keep this short and sweet. We've got our rocks that we had painted in here, and we were sitting well over 100 degrees on that little thermometer in there, and that's way too hot to be pumping hot air through our floor and cranking it back out the other side. That is almost overkill. So as those temperatures are too hot in here, we're basically going to take this apart, and I will rework this whole area after this is removed. I really wanted to come out here because I wanted to show my ideas for harvesting heat off of this compost. I coiled all this up. I have an inlet and an outlet. I've got my PEX tubing, but I also have my solar air pumping through this and blowing heat off of this compost into our seed tray here. We've got all of our seeds and stuff starting in there, and I've just left it open because it's been cranking enough heat out. But in order to get my copper coil inside my compost and get my system set up, I'm going to have to break this compost apart, and I'll still be able to use my air transfer system along with this coil. But I'm gonna require a twice the size compost pile at least. I'm going to need at least 2 cubic yards or so inside this greenhouse. So I'm gonna mass this up and build it inside this. But I'm going to bring another video where I put all of this together. I just wanted to share my ideas. I spent a good amount of time straightening out all this PEX tubing because it comes in a coil. It has a little bit of memory to it, so it wants to stay in that coil. So you have to basically go by and bend it and straighten it out. Once it got in the sun, it laid out a little bit easier for us and will be easier to bury underneath a couple inches of soil or so. This is the basic idea of what I'll be doing. I have that running to my overflow. My PEX tubing on this side is basically going to pair up with our copper, so we will run our copper through, and we already have all of our PEX ran. As soon as I get enough snow melted or get our hose over here and fill this up with the warmer temperatures, I might be able to use our well. I should be able to get some water over here without having it freeze up. So this 110 gallon tank should be full, or 3/4 of the way full. We have another 110 gallon tank that I'd like to get full. I'm probably going to fill that up with some snow, being that it's black, and it'll hold all that heat from the sun and melt all that up for us and just be another thermal heat sink in here. So that's the basic idea of what I'm doing. This PEX tubing will get buried, but I'm waiting till I get my system in order. So I will bring a good update on showing how I'm putting this together 100%, because I know everybody has a lot of questions when I put it together. I may end up bending the copper a little bit once I get situated and tear this compost apart, but that is for the next video. I want to show everybody how I'm putting this together. I didn't want to just build this and have it running and everybody just ask me questions on how I put it together. I really wanted to show everybody the basic gist of burying the hose and setting up our John Payne composting system. This little copper coil is going to be a better conductor than our PEX tubing would be, because it takes a lot more to transfer the heat from the outside to the inside of that PEX and actually heat it up. So we'll be able to transfer a little bit of heat to the floor of our greenhouse, and most of the heat will be dumped back in our overflow. Having the copper inside of our compost should crank about 100 to 140 degree water out of that consistently. As long as our pile is big enough, it should burn. So everybody stay tuned, as I'm going to develop this system over the next week here and bring a good update on how I'm throwing this together.